Hey everybody, welcome back to the Afterthoughts. Today we are going to talk about something that is honestly very near and dear to my heart. And it's really just this concept of retiring the strong friend title. I put that cape down and baby, I don't want it. I don't want it at all. And I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. I thought being a strong friend was like, woo, girl, everybody needs one of those. Yeah, nah. Maybe we do, but I don't want to be her. Somebody else can have that title. I think that it's important for us to have this conversation because you see a lot of feedback on different platforms talking about, oh, the strong friend this and the eldest daughter that. And though these are what I consider buzzwords right now, there is some truth to what that looks like. And I'm glad that there's conversation about it online because I think it's a conversation we all need to have, especially if you are an ambitious woman who's always busy, who is doing a lot of things. And if you're a strong friend, then you may put yourself in a position where you don't have the right level of support and connection with people that you need in order to build the things that you are building. And it's because you are wearing that cape. So there is some limitations to how much access people get to you. With that being said, I want to talk about some of those lessons that I've learned as I've made the decision and as I laid that cape down because, honey, she don't exist. I think we burned her all the way up. I was actually in a therapy session with my therapist. And I always tell people, I don't care who you are, you need a therapist. Even though my background is in counseling, that doesn't mean I can give myself therapy. So I was talking to my therapist and I was just talking about this idea that you truly do need to have the right people around you in order to do the things that you are called to do. The weight of carrying something can be heavy and life can be tough. Whether that's professionally or personally, you have just these roller coasters of life. And if you don't have the right people around you, or there seems to be some disconnects, it can be hard to navigate. I was having this conversation with my therapist, and she kept bringing up was this concept of implicit memories. Implicit memory is essentially you have these deep-rooted old beliefs that people will not show up for you, that you can't trust people because of your previous life experiences, typically, of course, experience in childhood. It's this idea that I have to protect myself because other people can't show up for me the way I will show up for me. What happens over time is we develop this strong shell around us, and then we only allow a few people to kind of penetrate that shell to really access the true essence of who we are. And it's because we don't trust folks. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. We hear this concept of the eldest daughter. The eldest daughter typically takes on a lot of responsibility, whether it's for your siblings, whether it's you're the person that has to make sure everybody is home before the streetlights come on. All those things, whether we like to believe it or not, show up in adulthood and in the relationships that we establish with our friends or partners or so on and so forth. If you don't trust people and you're used to always being the person that is running the show or taking care of others, then that is the same nuances that you carry into your friendship circles. And you then become the strong friend because you are used to doing everything on your own. Makes sense, right? But when you are aware, when you know better, you have to do better. And when I had that revelation, I realized, oh, girl, we got to do some shifting gears here. So one of the lessons that I learned is that you have to stop thinking that people can read your mind. Just because someone knows you well or seemingly knows you well does not mean that they can anticipate your needs. They are not in your head. And just because maybe they could do it 10 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that they can do it today in the season of life that you're in right now. So with that being said, if you are someone who's accustomed to being the strong friend and always present for others, if you are having a hard time or you just need some extra support, whether that's just I need someone to listen to me or whatever the case might be, then you're going to have to articulate that. Another thing that occurred to me, and this doesn't necessarily apply to me because I love meeting new people. I love connecting with new people. That's never been a challenge in my life. But I know for other people, if you have issues with trusting other people, it can be difficult to allow new people into your space. So we kind of embrace this mindset of no new friends. And the truth is, sometimes you do need new people in your life. They bring different, fresh perspectives. They show up for you differently. And it's almost like, I think that sometimes it's easier to be vulnerable with somebody who you don't necessarily have this extended history with than it is with someone who has known you since you were 5. That's not my story, but it could be for somebody else. Embracing new friends might help give you that fresh perspective or that fresh start where you can be your authentic self all the time and learn how to trust somebody and kind of practice that in a new space. So just something to think about. I think as a strong friend, just because you are used to carrying the load for a lot of people does not mean that you're a bad person for prioritizing yourself. If that means you're setting new boundaries, then so be it. If you don't prioritize yourself, who will? And I believe that you teach people how to treat you. So if you make it your priority to establish healthy boundaries, to make sure that you are pouring into yourself before you're pouring into everybody else, and if people get upset about that, I don't know if those are the best people you want around you, because you do have to prioritize yourself. And then if you are, again, someone who's accustomed to carrying the load, this can be hard. It can be really hard to basically tell somebody you love, no, I can't, or no, I'm not about that right now, or no, I don't feel comfortable with this particular situation. And that could be tough and require some difficult conversations. But in order for you to start relinquishing that cape, you're going to have to start establishing some healthy boundaries and letting people that you love know that, no, I can't show up like I used to in that capacity. It's not because I care for you any differently or I don't love you the same. It's just right now, I got to do me because I'm drained. I'm exhausted and I got to pour into myself because when I go to bed at night, you're not the person that's filling up my cup. I have to. And to me, you have to be very unapologetic about setting those healthy boundaries for yourself in order to make sure that you are well. And again, if people have a hard time with that, some will get over it. They might be hurt for a few, but they'll come around if they love you for real. And if they don't, it's you or them. I think you could still wish people well from a distance, but that's just me. Okay, and that leads me to my next one, is starting to break this idea that you can't trust people. And that requires extreme vulnerability. And I say extreme because for somebody who's used to being the strong friend, it could be uncomfortable having to tell people like, girl, I just had a breakdown. I just cried my whole insides out because life is kicking my ass. Like that can be a tough conversation to have if you're used to always being the strong friend. I believe that the more vulnerable we are with the people that we love and trust, then we open the door for them to see us from a different lens. They get to see us from a different perspective. They get to see that you go through things just like they do. You just handle it differently. You just make it look like it's easy. And I think sometimes people forget that just because you are the strong friend and because you make everything look so seamless that you don't go through things. And that's not true. Like you go through things just like everybody else. The difference is you just very mindful of how you express that. But I think there's also some things that you go through life that isn't for everybody to know. Some things are truly a walk with you and God that He requires for you to really work it out one-on-one with Him. And some people don't understand that idea either. But again, being vulnerable and maybe even having that conversation and saying like, hey, this is not something that I feel is meant to be talked about at this current time. Maybe it's something you revisit later, or maybe not. People have to learn to understand and respect not only your vulnerability, but your boundaries. And that leads me to my absolute favorite, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I am a boundaries queen. Like I take boundaries so seriously, and it's something that I really learned when I was in grad school. Of course, I'm learning about it from a educational perspective and learning all your theories and all that cute stuff. But at the same time, I was actually in therapy, working through my own stuff and learning this whole concept of why it's so important to establish healthy boundaries. And that was back in like 2010. Here I am years later, and I still heavily believe in setting healthy boundaries. They have changed my life. But there's a very, very thin line between creating a healthy boundary and isolating yourself. You have to be mindful of that, because if you're not mindful of it, you will isolate yourself and not have anybody around. So you have to learn to establish the boundaries that are meant to protect you, but not isolate you. I get this question a lot. It's like, what are some healthy boundaries, or what are some ways to establish healthy boundaries? I always say there are a lot of resources out there. There are some amazing books out there that I do have listed on the Afterthoughts newsletter that you can definitely check out, that really give you kind of step-by-step instructions and examples of how to establish those boundaries in specific scenarios. When it comes to healthy boundaries, I always like to consider how my boundary will impact long-term. Is my boundary going to help me be a better person? Does my boundary help me get closer to my purpose? Does it help me show up as a better Christian? Does it help me show up as a better woman? If those answers are typically yes, then I know my boundary is pretty solid. If my boundary is coming from a place of anger, resentment, like, ooh, I don't want somebody to have that level of access to me, or that person hurt my feelings, so I'm just going to cut them off, then that's not a healthy boundary. That means you need to have a conversation. I think that sometimes people get confused when it comes to setting boundaries. Some people think, oh, I'll just set this boundary and cut them off, when really, no, you need to have an adult conversation and let somebody know how you feel in an adult manner, which means you don't have to yell, you don't have to scream, you don't have to cry, you don't have to be dramatic. You can literally have a healthy dialogue with someone and explain to them that you felt a way. To me, it's not that complex, not that complicated, but people do have a very hard time expressing themselves and really explaining how someone may have hurt them or how they're disappointed, so on and so forth. So I think you have to show people grace. These are lessons that I have learned as I decided that I didn't want to wear that cape anymore. And I have no intentions of picking up that cape ever again. I'm very comfortable in the space that I'm in. If you feel like you have to wear that Superwoman strong friend cape, then I would highly encourage you to take some time out to do some soul searching and really discover why you don't feel safe. Why do you feel like you have to have this cape, which is really kind of like a protective blanket, really? Why do you feel like you can't put it down? And more times than not, it's deeply rooted into something that we probably don't even pay attention to because we're so quote unquote far removed from it because it happened so long ago, right? The injury that happened in childhood, that here you are 20 plus years later, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's why I feel that way. I didn't realize it was because I was the oldest daughter and handled all the business. You don't realize it. I highly suggest, if you feel that way, just take some time to think about it, journal about it, talk to your friend circle about it, and explore like, wow, do I really act like this? Why? What is your thoughts on it? So on and so forth, and get you a safe space. And if not, there are so many amazing women out here who have experience with this, who are very open to having conversations about it, myself included. So if you have some thoughts, comments, or just want to talk about it, definitely comment, respond to this. Let me know what you guys are thinking. And that is it for today. Those are my lessons for being a retired strong friend. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next Afterthoughts post.